In today's video, we're going to discuss the AWS Certified SysOps Administrator Associate Exam. This is a hands-on, operations-focused AWS certification that you're going to be sure to enjoy. It's going to take a lot of preparation, and over the next few minutes, I'm going to go over the exam guide in detail, starting with who this exam is for. This credential helps organizations identify and develop talent with critical skills for implementing cloud initiatives. Once you've earned the AWS Certified SysOps Administrator Associate certification, it proves that you can demonstrate experience deploying, managing, and operating workloads in AWS. So, who should take this exam? The AWS Certified SysOps Administrator Associate is intended for system administrators in the cloud. The recommendations are a minimum of 1 year of hands-on experience with AWS technology, experience deploying, managing, and operating workloads on AWS, as well as implementing security controls and compliance requirements, a familiarity with using both the AWS Management Console and the AWS Command Line Interface, sometimes abbreviated as CLI, and an understanding of the AWS well-architected framework, as well as AWS networking and security services. Quite a bit of information to know. The length of the exam, the amount of time that you're given to complete the exam, is 180 minutes. That is a 3-hour exam. The cost to take the exam is $150. The format includes 65 questions that are a combination of multiple choice, multiple response, and an exam lab. So yeah, it's going to be quite the exam. Let's go ahead and jump over into the exam guide and go over this point by point. Okay, so I just kind of went over this. The exam also validates the candidate's ability to complete the following task. Let's see here. Well-architected framework, I mentioned that earlier. The management console, this command line interface, implementing security controls, compliance requirements. Here's some new ones. Monitor, log, and troubleshoot systems. Applying network concepts, specifically, for example, DNS, TCP/IP, and knowing about firewalls. Being able to implement architectural requirements, for example, high availability and performance capacity. Being able to perform business continuity and disaster recovery procedures. Identifying, classifying, and remediating incidents. Now, the target candidate, as I mentioned on the prior website, was candidates should have about 1 year of experience with deploying, managing, and networking and AWS security on AWS. If you don't have 1 year of full experience, don't become discouraged. You're just going to need to study very hard and also very smart and follow and make sure you know all the things that I cover in this exam guide. You can still clear this. It's just going to require a good deal of preparation. Recommended general IT knowledge, 1 to 2 years of experience as a sysadmin in an operations role. Remember, this is an operations-focused certifications targeting that operational-focused candidate. Experience monitoring, logging, and troubleshooting. The network concepts I mentioned earlier. The ability to implement architectural requirements. For example, high availability, performance, and capacity as well. Recommended AWS knowledge. Ideally, these are, in an ideal situation, minimum of 1 year of hands-on experience with AWS technology. If you don't worry. You can work at this. Just study. You're studying for this exam. You can do this. Experience in deploying, managing, and operating workloads on AWS. Understanding the well-architected framework, as I mentioned earlier. Hands-on experience with the console and CLI. Understanding networking and security services. And hands-on experience implementing security controls and compliance. Now, I've mentioned that about 2-3 times now, so that should be seared into the gray matter here. Sometimes repetition is a good thing, especially when it maps to your exam. Now, What is considered out of scope for the target candidate? This following is a non-exhaustive list of related job tasks that the target candidate is not expected to be able to perform. NOT, capital, not. And this would be things like designing distributed architectures or designing continuous integration and continuous delivery CI/CD pipelines, designing hybrid and multi-VPC networking, developing software. Thank goodness you don't have to develop software during the exam. Define security, compliance, and governance requirements, all outside of the scope of the exam. Now, let's look at the response types. This may be a little bit different than what you're used to seeing. You have 3 different response types. You got multiple choice, which means there's one correct answer and 3 or more incorrect responses. Multiple response has 2 or more correct responses out of 5 or more response options. And then it's exam lab. And we're going to go over that so you can understand what that is. You'll have a scenario that is composed of a set of tasks to perform in the AWS Management Console or the AWS CLI or the command line interface. Let's see here. What I really want to do here, multiple choice and multiple response are kind of understood. Let's go over this exam lab here. So exam labs, you need to be able to complete the required task for a given scenario in the AWS Management Console or AWS CLI in the provided AWS account. When you begin your exam, you will receive notification about the number of questions in the multiple choice and the multiple response section, and the number of exam labs in the exam lab section. You will also learn the percentage of your score that will be determined by your work in the exam labs. Plan to leave 20 minutes to complete each exam lab, okay? So, this is important. Finish all your work on the exam lab before you move to the next exam lab. You will not be able to return to the prior exam lab. There's no going back. You are welcome to use the virtual machine notepad or the AWS CLI while working on your exam labs. There may be more than one way to perform the exam labs. In those cases, you will receive full credit if you achieve the correct end state to the scenario. There are also opportunities for partial credit for completion of the exam lab. One other thing that I kind of skipped over earlier, let me see if I can go back and find it here. This is important because this is unique to these AWS exams that have exam labs. So in that multiple choice section, once you reach the end of the multiple choice section, you have the opportunity to go back when you're in the multiple choice section to review any of the multiple choice and multiple response questions. However, this will be the last opportunity to answer those multiple choice and multiple response questions, because once you step into the labs, there's no going back to that multiple choice or multiple response. So make sure you realize that and budget your time accordingly. Can't emphasize that enough. Take a note there, write it down, take a mental note, or what have you. Now, there's always usually some unscored content on these exams. There's going to be 15 unscored questions on the SysOps Administrator Associate exam. You won't know which ones are unscored, so do your best on all of them. But if you get hung up on one, if it's a multiple response or a multiple choice, you can mark it and come back to it, provided you haven't jumped into the labs. But yeah, just try to pace yourself in terms of the time. The exam score ranges between 100 to 1,000. Passing scores is 720, so you can still get 720 out of 1,000 and still clear this thing. Now let's jump right into the course outline, the domains. This is a beefy set of domains here. There are 6 domains on this. Domain is monitoring, logging, and remediation, worth 20% of the exam. Domain 2 is reliability and business continuity focus, 16%. Domain 3 is deployment, provisioning, and automation, worth 18% of the exam. Domain 4 is security and compliance. That's 16% of the exam. Domain 5 is networking and content delivery. That's 18% of the exam. And domain 6 is cost and performance optimization. That's 12% of the exam. Now I'm going to go through each of these domains so you don't have to go through the pain of going through this document yourself. Anywhere where I see I can add some additional insights, I will. So just kind of sit back, relax as I go through the guide here with you. Domain 1, monitoring, logging, and remediation. Bullet point 1.1, implement metrics, alarms, and filters by using AWS monitoring and logging services. That's identifying, collecting, analyzing, and exporting logs. For example, Amazon CloudWatch logs, CloudWatch log insights, and AWS CloudTrail logs. Collect metrics and logs using the CloudWatch agent. Create CloudWatch alarms, create metrics filters, create CloudWatch dashboards, and configure notifications, including simple notification service notifications, service quotas, CloudWatch alarms, and AWS health events. Bullet point 1.2, remediate issues based on monitoring and availability metrics. Troubleshoot or take corrective actions based on notifications and alarms. Configure Amazon Event Bridge rules to trigger actions, and use AWS Systems Manager automation documents to take action based on AWS configuration rules. So that's domain 1 there, finished. Domain 2, all right, let's focus here. Reliability and business continuity. Bullet point 2.1, implement scalability and elasticity. So that could be anything from creating and maintaining AWS auto-scaling plans, implementing caching, implementing Amazon RDS replicas and Amazon Aurora replicas, implement loosely coupled architectures, differentiate between horizontal scaling and vertical scaling. So vertical scaling is throwing a bigger EC2 instance on your architecture, and horizontal scaling is scaling literally wide, throwing more computers at it versus just bigger computers at it. Bullet point 2.2, implement high availability and resilient environments. Configure Elastic Load Balancer and Amazon Route 53 health checks. Differentiate between the use of a single availability zone and multiple multi-AZ deployments. For example, Amazon EC2 auto-scaling groups, Elastic Load Balancing, Amazon FSx, Amazon RDS, being able to introduce high availability and resilience and configure those services accordingly. Implement fault-tolerant workloads. For example, Amazon EFS or the Elastic File System and Elastic IP addresses, leveraging those to introduce fault tolerance. Implementing Route 53 routing policies, for example, could be failover, weighted policies, latency-based policies. Bullet point 2.3, implement backup and restore strategies. Automate snapshots and backups based on use cases. For example, RDS snapshots, AWS backups, RTO and RPO, recovery time objective and recovery point objectives, Amazon Data Lifecycle Manager and retention policy. Know about how to restore databases, for example, point-in-time restore and promote and read replicas to primary databases. Implement versioning and lifecycle rules. Configure Amazon S3 cross-region replication. Execute disaster recovery procedures. This is all great stuff. I know it can seem a little overwhelming here, but just pace yourself on this certification preparation or any AWS certification for that matter. And I believe you definitely can do this. Just take it one step at a time, okay? Now, domain 3, deployment, provisioning, and automation. Bullet point 3.1, provision and maintain cloud resources. Create and manage Amazon machine images. For example, EC2 Image Builder. That's a solution within AWS. A set of templates that you can build the EC2 Image Builder. Create, manage, and troubleshoot AWS CloudFormation. Provision resources across the multiple AWS regions and accounts. For example, AWS Resource Access Manager, CloudFormation stack sets, and IAM cross-account roles. Select deployment scenarios and services. For example, blue-green, rolling canary. This is somewhat a DevOps type of thing where you control or decide what type of deployments you want to do. Identify and remediate deployment issues. For example, service quotas, subnet sizing, CloudFormation, AWS OpWorks errors, and permissions. Bullet point 3.2, automate manual or repeatable processes. Use AWS services, for example, the OpWorks, Systems Administrator, CloudFormation, to automate deployment processes. Implement automated patch management. And then finally here in bullet 3.2, schedule automated tasks by using AWS services, for example, EventBridge and AWS Config. Moving right along to domain 4, security and compliance. Bullet point 4.1, implement and manage security and compliance policies. Implement IAM or identity and access management features, for example, including password policies, multi-factor authentication, roles, SAML, federated identity, resource policies, and policy conditions. Troubleshoot and audit access issues by using AWS services. For example, AWS CloudTrail, IAM Access Analyzer, and the IAM Policy Simulator. These are things that are very good to test how much access your IAM policies have. Preferably, you want to introduce least security privileges to get the job done. Validate service control policies and permission boundaries. This is something that you would associate with AWS organizations. Review AWS Trusted Advisor security checks. Validate AWS region and service selections based on compliance requirements. In other words, what AWS regions are available in your AWS accounts. Do you need to deploy in Australia? If you don't, chances are you probably don't want to have that region as an active region where people within your organization can deploy. Implement secure multi-account access strategies. For example, AWS Control Tower and AWS organizations. Bullet point 4.2, implement data and infrastructure protection strategies. Enforce a data classification scheme. Create, manage, and protect encryption keys. Implement encryption at rest. For example, the AWS Key Management Service. Implementing encryption in transit. For example, the AWS Certificate Manager and VPN. Securely store secrets by using AWS services that would include AWS Secrets Manager or Systems Manager Parameter Store. Review reports or findings for AWS in AWS Security Hub, Amazon Guard Duty, AWS Config, and Amazon Inspector. Domain 5, networking and content delivery. Bullet point 5.1, implement networking features and connectivity, which would include configuring a VPC, for example, subnets, route tables, network access control lists, security groups, NAT gateway, and internet gateways. Configure private connectivity, for example, Systems Manager, Session Manager, VPC endpoints, VPC peering, and VPN. Configure AWS Network Protection Services, for example, AWS Web Application Firewall and AWS Shield. Lots and lots of great stuff here. And the good news is, by the time you've made it to AWS SysOps Administrator, chances are, I would bet this isn't your first AWS certification. You might already have Developer Associate and or Solution Architect Associate. So some of that knowledge that you've learned there is going to help you with your SysOps Associate as well, okay? So these associate certifications, they feed off of each other. Let's see, bullet 5.2, configure domains, DNS services, and content delivery. Such things as configuring Route 53 hosted zones and records, implementing Route 53 routing policies, as we mentioned earlier, geolocation and geoproximity are a couple of different ones. Configure DNS, for example, Route 53 resolver, and configuring Amazon CloudFront and S3 origin access identity. Being able to know how to configure an S3 static website on AWS. Bullet point 5.3, troubleshoot network connectivity issues. See that troubleshooting aspect. not just knowing the theory, but knowing how you would fix a problem. This is very helpful in a production environment that you're supporting in operations. Being able to interpret those VPC configurations, which includes things like the subnets and the route tables, network access control list, and security groups. Collecting and interpreting those logs, VPC flow logs, for example, Elastic Load Balancer access logs, AWS Web Application Firewall Web Access Control List logs, and CloudFront logs. Identify and remediate CloudFront caching issues. Troubleshoot hybrid and private connectivity issues. Wow, this is a lot of great stuff. Like I say, this is going to be a lot of work to clear their certification, but you don't want to just pass certifications. You want to actually be able to take this knowledge you learn and get a job with it and do great on that job. And you're going to do just that. Have all the faith in the world in you. All right. Domain 6, the final domain, cost and performance optimization. Bullet point 6.1, implement cost optimization strategies. For example, implement cost allocation tags. Identify and remediate underutilized or unused resources by using AWS services and tools. For example, Trusted Advisor, AWS Compute Optimizer, and Cost Explorer. Configuring AWS budgets and billing alarms. One of the very first things you should do when you set up your AWS account, in particular, if you have a free AWS account, is to go into AWS budgets and set up a billing alarm ASAP so you don't get a bill that you weren't expected for. You weren't anticipating, larger than what you were expecting from AWS. Assess resource usage patterns to qualify workloads for EC2 Spot instances. So being able to determine what use cases are optimal for EC2 Spot use cases. Identify opportunities to use managed services. For example, when would it be better to use Amazon RDS, Relational Database Service, or AWS Fargate, or Elastic File System, those types of things. Bullet point 6.2, implement performance optimization strategies. Recommend compute resources based on performance metrics. Monitor Amazon EBS metrics and modify configurations to increase performance efficiency. Implement S3 performance features, for example, S3 transfer acceleration and multi-part uploads. Monitor RDS metrics and modify the configuration to increase performance efficiency. For example, performance insights and RDS proxy to optimize those database workloads. Enable enhanced EC2 capabilities. For example, the enhanced networking adapter to get more bandwidth. Instant store for scratch storage. High performance instance storage, high speed I/O. Placement groups. And then we are at the appendix. So the appendix, I'm not going to go through this line by line, but this section includes key tools, technologies, and concepts that might be covered on the exam. What I'm going to do here is link the link to this particular SysOps exam guide in the description below so you can look at this in detail. So I'll let you do that on your own time. I want to thank you for your time and attention. I hope this has helped you out greatly. Let me know your feedback in the comments, especially if you have any questions. Again, this is the Thoughtful Techie Cloud YouTube channel, and I am here to help support you on your AWS Cloud journey and to generate AWS videos to teach you and give you well-architected tips. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.